My God. Oh my God.
Here we go. Hi, and welcome back to Faster Futures from Silicon Valley. I'm Ron Morris. I'm the director of Omnis Education San Francisco. And we are joined today by Juan Carlos Velton, our expert in innovation. And today's going to be a really special session. First of all, it is our last session of 2021. And I think it's fitting that we finish on the theme of entrepreneurship, because really it is the vehicle that brings all innovation to market in Silicon Valley. And it is a focal point for so many actors in this ecosystem. And this is also going to be a special session because we are joined by George Damouny. George comes from PlugAndPlay. He's a partner at PlugAndPlay Ventures. He's also a board member at PlugAndPlay Tech Center. And George has been involved in a number of very exciting deals recently, a number of unicorns in the past few years. And he's going to share his perspective on innovation and investment coming from Silicon Valley, but also with a global perspective. So guys, thanks for joining us. Thank you so much, George, being a special guest, our last guest of 2021. And I'll leave it to you guys.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you for having us in your classroom. And we hope that this session is very useful for you. What we thought is that in order to really understand entrepreneurship, you really need to understand the people that make it possible. And this is the people who actually give you the air to launch and grow and scale companies. Venture capital has been a key element of Silicon Valley's success since the 1950s when it was invented. And it has evolved tremendously. And I'm going to share my screen. I'm just going to show you one slide. And then we're going to go straight to fireside chat with George and take it from there. Hopefully you will also have questions while we talk with George, and you can put these questions on the chat so that we can ask them as we go. So we will have the first half an hour with George, and then we will then have a half an hour lecture afterwards. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen with you. Oops, I need to be able to share. Can you enable me to be a host, please? Let's see. Give us 1 second, and if we can't do it, I would just skip this. But I wanted to show you something that is very relevant to today, and is very relevant to you in Europe. So I assume, David or Ron, you are enabling me to share my screen. Perfect. Okay, so just one little screen. This is the cover of The Economist from last week. Venture capitalism, startup finance goes global. And I would love to start our session with George by asking you, what do you think of this? This is the first time really in 2021 that we really see the globalization of this key element of Silicon Valley. So the floor is yours. What do you think of this? What kind of global are we talking about?
Well, thanks, JC. And it's great to be here. Thank you for having me. I think The Economist is late to the party, if I'm speaking kind of frankly. VC, in terms of globalization, I think has always been a category, and it's now more prevalent than ever before. And publications like The Economist, Business Insider just interviewed me yesterday about the same topic. I think now media is catching on to where the market is heading. Us being in a virtual world, I think Silicon Valley is not the hub of innovation as it once was, where everybody had to come here to find VC dollars. I think there's VCs popping up everywhere. And in a sense, that's creating more competition in the VC world, which is boosting innovation everywhere else. We saw a new bank, for example, the most valuable bank in Brazil this week reached a $41 billion valuation. It's a startup that beat out all the legacy banks in Brazil and now is the most valuable bank in Brazil. And we're seeing that with a lot of other industries, right? Airbnb in the hotel space, Uber in the taxi space, and all these startups kind of coming up and displacing the legacy players, not only in the US, but this is now a global phenomenon as well.
So is VC, are VCs finally innovating? Is that what you're saying? Is just like the other, the Airbnbs and the Ubers, are you guys now innovating in your own industry?
I think kind of. It's hard to say because VCs tend to be kind of age old, where it's very humanistic and you have to meet the entrepreneur and get to have a feel for the entrepreneurs before you actually invest in that company. So I think there's always going to be a humanistic approach to investing in early stage companies, because it's hard to put a metric on the charisma of a founder, for example, or how well that founder can pitch VCs or their business to different corporations or customers. And I think things like that are hard to quantify, but in a sense where we need to shift our focus, or we need to be more adaptable, issue faster term sheets, invest globally, maybe push the limit with valuations, maybe push the limit with dollar sizes, maybe get out of our comfort zone a little bit as it relates to spaces and sizes and stage. I think absolutely, because there's so much competition, not only on the startup side, but also on the VC side, where the VCs are fighting for the best deals. So it's either you innovate or die, right? In the VC world, in the startup world, in the corporate world, it kind of translates across the whole value chain.
And in Plug and Play, what is your unique value proposition? What is your secret formula for that?
So, and every VC is going to say that they have a secret sauce, or they're going to say, oh, we have this kind of value add for startups. That's how they get into the best deals. I can say at Plug and Play, we're very lucky. We have the largest global ecosystem in the world as it relates to corporations. We have about 550 corporations sponsoring Plug and Play's activities that are coming here and finding startups to work with or invest in. So it's the Global 1000. We have 80 banks working with us. We have almost 100 insurance companies working with us, about 70 brands, retailers, and CPGs. And so this is like Pepsi, Coca-Cola, Nike, Procter & Gamble. We have Deutsche Bank, again, all the insurance companies you could probably think of. And essentially what they're doing is coming to us, finding startups that they can pilot or license, and then we're going out and finding those companies and matchmaking them. So we're doing those introductions between corporations and startups and VCs for, one, on the corporate side, revenue generation for startups, and then two, on the VC side, helping startups get to market faster and get more VC dollars faster than they would traditionally. And we're lucky now. I mean, JC, we've known each other for 6 years, maybe 7 years. It's been a long time. And we've grown a lot since then. So we're now in 38 locations around the world. We have over 700 employees here at Plug and Play. So by VC, we're one of the larger players in the world, which is great. We've grown a lot since I joined the company 8 years ago. I was, an employee number 15. So we've grown quite a bit. And we just hit our 28th unicorn. As we're always investing pre-seed and seed, and having 28 unicorns in the portfolio, it's a very nice accomplishment.
Could you just briefly just define what unicorn is, just in case some of our viewers are not familiar with that term, and possibly talk about one or two of those cases and what you think you learned most about? You can take successful examples, but also failures in the past couple of years. Yeah,
I have a bunch of failures. Every VC will. So a unicorn is when a company reaches a $1 billion valuation or greater. And it was coined by Eileen Lee, one of the premier VCs here in Silicon Valley, where she wrote this great blog post about chasing unicorns. And that's what VCs are doing. We're chasing unicorns, these very rare companies. I would say it was rare back then when she wrote the article almost 10 years ago. Now I think a unicorn is not as important as it once was, where a lot of VCs now are chasing those $10 billion plus companies, which are decacorns, I would say. But the unicorn is a $1 billion plus valuation. We're lucky enough to have 28 of those in the portfolio, and the portfolio is growing a lot. We had 13 new unicorns be minted this year alone in our portfolio. So the market has gone nuts, I would say. A lot of late stage funding has helped that. A lot of IPOs have helped that, and large acquisitions. But there's market flowing from the top to the down, all the way in between. When it comes to learnings, I've been lucky enough to pre-seed and seed 8 of those unicorns for Plug and Play. Some of them include Honey, Rappi, Customer, Flutterwave, Turing, and several more. And I can say the learnings that I've had across, investing in successful companies, it always has one common denominator, which is the founders. If the founders, and actually all the companies that I've invested in, all the unicorns, those founder teams have gone and exited or made those companies unicorns and are still with those companies today. So I think that's very important to really recognize what that means at their early stages when it's two people and a dog and an idea, creating some kind of technology, pre-product, pre-launch, pre-everything, and really helping it grow up into a multi-billion-dollar company with sometimes thousands of employees, multinational businesses with hundreds of millions in VC funding. So yeah, the founder is always super important. Tenacity, super important when it comes to founding teams. Charisma, as I mentioned before, very hard to quantify what that means, but having me come in as an investor or other investors with some kind of infectious energy is what we like to say, where I need to get involved in the company. I'm so excited because the founder knows how to pitch that technology or that vision so well, and they're building something greater than themselves. They're not in it for a family business that's generating $10 million or $50 million a year in revenue. They really want to make an impact, create a global company, and really have a vision for something much bigger than themselves. Great examples of that are the companies that you see today, Google, Facebook, Amazon, all these huge companies. And failures, I think I have a lot. I mean, I've seen a lot of pre-seed and seed companies who reached multi-billion dollars in valuation that I passed on for one reason or another. I'd say the most famous one that I passed on was a company called Revolut. It's a mobile-only bank that started out in London. And I think now they're like a 20 billion pound company, which would have been my biggest company. But we invested in their competitor called N26, who was, about a year and a half, 2 years into market faster than they were. And they were, generating 10,000 new accounts per month. And when Revolut pitched me, they had 5,000 beta users. And I was asking them, like, why wouldn't N26 just take your business? They're expanding across Europe. They're going into the UK next. And I didn't think the founder had a good answer for me. So I ended up passing on that company at a £4 million pre-money valuation. And, you win some, you lose some. That would have been a good one for me.
I heard that PlugAndPlay also passed on Airbnb. Is that right?
Yeah, we passed on Airbnb. We had the three founders actually pitch us in the office. They came for a pitch competition. And our CEO loves to tell the story. He was doing co-investments with Tim Draper. He's a very famous VC here in Silicon Valley. And Tim Draper was doing fine. He bought like $18 million worth of Bitcoin when it was $300 per coin. So he's a billionaire in that himself. But Airbnb came to pitch us and they handshook on a deal, $400,000. Tim Draper was going to put in $300,000. Our CEO was going to put in $100,000. And we were going to lead their pre-seed round. This is, when they had very little idea of what they were doing. They had a product as an MVP and they handshook on it. It was going to be like a $3 million pre-money valuation. Later that night, Tim Draper calls Saeed, our CEO, and says, Saeed, I'm getting worried about this deal. What if, one of the residents gets hurt or, God forbid, gets raped in one of these rooms? The lawsuit's going to shut down the business and that's going to be it. I think we should pull out. Saeed listened to him and missed out on that investment. Unfortunately, that $100,000 would have been worth about $200 million today. So Saeed calls Tim Draper and says, "You owe me $200 million."
What is once you invest in one of these companies, how do you see your role as a member of the team, basically, that's enabling this company? What is your role?
The role of the VC is a part owner of the company. So when you're a part owner in the company, you're incentivized to help that company grow. If that company fails, you're going to lose your investment. So any VC is going to want to play a part in the company and help that company out as much as possible because they have skin in the game. They put in their own dollars, they have equity, they have a percentage of the business, much like the entrepreneurs do. So the role of a VC, I would say a good VC, whether it's taking a board seat or not, is doing some kind of value creation for those entrepreneurs that they're investing in. A player like us have built out the largest ecosystem to help startups get revenue faster with corporates, expand globally in our 38 offices. We have a large team for portfolio support, marketing support, legal, HR, and other types of services, and of course VC funding along the lines. Other VCs might say, we're really good at operational experience. We're going to join your board. We've built these companies before. We know what it takes to, get into markets faster. We know what it takes to expand globally. We know what it takes to fire a CTO of the business, for example, and we're going to help you along the way, because entrepreneurship is not a straight path up. It's going to have a lot of ups and downs before you eventually, go boom or go bust. So a lot of VCs will kind of play off of their own expertise and value add. And every VC might have a little bit different of a value add, but let's say a lot of it comes with network, expertise, capital, and just like helping the business with something that they learned along the way of doing it themselves.
And for some, oh, sorry.
If you're following up, go for it, JC.
Well, yeah, just one quick follow-up on this. What are some of the common myths that especially first-time entrepreneurs have about VC?
I would say a lot of first-time entrepreneurs might be scared of VCs. They've heard stories of this VC giving me a term sheet. They took a board seat in my company and they ended up kicking me out of my own business. I think that's a misconception oftentimes. I think VCs want to partner with entrepreneurs. They're not in it to steal ideas. If you're going to invest in a company, you're investing, like I said before, you're investing in the team more than anything else, especially pre-Series A, without much metrics to go off of. So that's, I think, a big misconception. Another misconception is they're going to give me money and then just disappear. And I think a lot of VCs do that. It could be a misconception or not in many cases. But I think, the best of the best entrepreneurs are going to have multiple VCs competing for those deals. The best of the best entrepreneurs may not even need to raise money, or have like VCs might pitch them before they pitch the VC. And I think, there's a lot of, nuances with that, because it is humanistic. It's a very people's business, I would say. Still, there's no platform you can go on. You can't go on your trading platform and say, I want to purchase $1 million of stock in, this seed company. It just, there's crowdfunding platforms, but like it doesn't really exist yet.
Yet. So you see AI helping your industry in the future?
We've seen so many platforms coming on and saying like, we're going to help you with the deal flow. We're going to help you narrow down what that unicorn is going to look like. And again, that's super hard. I think you might hit some kind of ballpark by saying, these two co-founders, you have a CTO, you have a CEO, equal distribution on the cap table in terms of equity. Maybe one went to HBS, one went to Stanford GSB, one's MIT grad. Like it looks good on paper, but again, like that it's hard to say, do these two founders, did they meet 10 years ago? What's their relationship like? Do their wives hang out outside of work? Do they hate each other? Do they have like this, like co-opetition, like they're cooperating, but they're also competing against. We've seen that a lot, where a CTO wants to be the CEO, and the CEO is like, "What the hell? This is my business. Like, stay in your lane." And those companies don't do well. Like we've seen CTOs leave the business. We've seen a CEO kick out a CTO that has 40% equity on the cap table, and those things are really hard to measure. Like, how do you measure those things at the early stages, right? So there are platforms that are helping. I'm skeptical, and we don't use any at PlugAndPlay, to be honest. But we'll see where the market goes. I'll never say never to that.
Of course.
You mentioned the importance of founders in this equation, and I think it'd be interesting, for our students. Again, some of them that will be watching this are aspiring entrepreneurs. What's the image of entrepreneurs now in Silicon Valley, and has it evolved? Is it, because a lot of people have that image. It's a university dropout, it's a boys club, it's younger people. What's your view on that today?
It's a very good question. And I would say, VCs have a very implicit bias when it comes to entrepreneurs. A lot of them do like to invest in a certain demographic of founder. And it could be some VCs only invest in Ivy League business school founders. But I would say like the general makeup has gotten pretty diverse, where it once was, people in their 40s and 50s who left their very lucrative jobs at Intel and AMD Microsystems to go off and develop their next chip company. My uncle was one of those people. He was old when he started his company. And then it evolved to, we back like, college dropouts, with Mark Zuckerberg and Bill Gates and all these guys saying like, and Elon Musk saying college is not important, just do your own thing and forget college. And then now I think it's like, it doesn't, for us especially, it doesn't really matter, I would say. We're in this market, it's super competitive, and there's more companies being minted now and started now than ever before. So I would say like it's very diverse in terms of makeup. What we like to see is diverse teams, which means maybe there's a female entrepreneur as a founder, maybe it's a minority entrepreneur. We like equal distribution on the cap table between CTO and CEO, and that's important too. We don't like solo founder teams. We want to see a technical founder on the cap table initially. If it's a consumer company, potentially a designer as well on the cap table as a third founder. We don't like distributed teams for the most part, although in this world it's hard to avoid. We like at least the executives to sit in the same vicinity so they can meet up and hash out challenges together. So yeah, there's not really a clear answer to this, because we've done a huge study, and Harvard did a huge study and basically found that there's no correlation between what that team looks like at the early stages, whether it's husband and wife, whether it's two females, whether it's two males, whether it's this or that. It doesn't really, define the success of the company in the later stages.
Great. Maybe on that same theme of diversification in investments, maybe a word on, at one point it was quite clear that when it comes to investing in innovation, that Silicon Valley is the epicenter worldwide. Do you see that changing? And is that, you mentioned briefly, going to the UK and looking at investments there. What's happening now internationally in terms of venture capital?
I think what's happening now is valuations in Silicon Valley have gone so crazy high that it's hard to get good deals in Silicon Valley. So the best of the best entrepreneurs are raising their pre-seed rounds at a $30 million valuation. So, which means you need to hit those $10 billion company exits if you want to generate a good return for somebody like us, which is a 10x of what we were going for before. For Plug and Play, we're investing 50% in the US and 50% outside of the US. So we're a little bit different in terms of our own investment philosophy. We don't think that the US or Silicon Valley is the only place to invest and find good unicorns or good decacorns in the future. We're investing everywhere. And France is one of those. Look, we have a few offices in France. And I would say France and Germany have been the two highest volume investment areas for us outside of the US. Even more than Latin America, even more than Asia. We're seeing a lot of great entrepreneurs kind of being minted in those regions. And entrepreneurship is global. We're not naive to think that Silicon Valley is the only place with smart people and smart, VCs. It's not true. But I would say this, once those companies are founded at Series B+, we do want them to expand outside of France or outside of Germany, because the markets in terms of a VC backable and ROI potential exit for a VC is greater in the US or greater when you expand internationally. So I would say like having a global mindset as a international or outside of Silicon Valley entrepreneur is important, and plans to maybe make it into the US market at Series B or Series C and beyond.
Do you see any differences between entrepreneurs within the Silicon Valley environment and those in Europe? Are they different? Are ones? How do they approach risk? Is there any general difference that you see?
Yeah, I think there's a pretty clear difference, and the lines are getting more and more blurred as the years go on. I started investing outside of the US about 7 years ago with my first investment in France. So when I first started investing, I think in Europe in general, the mindset of the entrepreneur was very hard to crack outside of the European mindset, which is, I'm fine doing 10 million euros a year. I think that's a great business. Like if I exit for 50 million, I'm going to be wildly successful, individually speaking. And those businesses are very hard for VCs to invest in. We're not trying to get 50 million euro exits. Even for us, when we're investing at 5 million, pre-money valuations, we're not trying to get 50 million euro exits. We're trying to hit those $1 billion exits still. So cracking out of the mindset of a global company, cracking out of the mindset of I'm fine hitting X amount of revenue. I think like, and when I talk to a lot, it's funny, when I talk to a lot of these European entrepreneurs like 6-7 years ago, they were like almost making fun of people in Silicon Valley. Like, oh no, we're very realistic here in Europe. We're not like you guys in Silicon Valley that says like, oh, I'm going to make it to the moon. Like, I'm going to just grow my company into the big, I'm going to be Google one day. They're like, no, we're European. We're okay. Like 15 million euros a year is fine. Like, that's a really great business. And for somebody like us and somebody like who's like trying to, you know, compare and contrast, should I invest in a company in the US or in Europe? That was challenging at first. And that's why now it went from 10% Europe or 10% outside of the US, 90% in the US to, you know, 80-20, 70-30, and now 50-50. That mindset has changed a lot over the years. And I think it's important for European or Latin American or anywhere in the world for that entrepreneur, even in Silicon Valley, for that entrepreneur to really have a bigger dream than themselves. Like I said in the beginning of the talk, build something greater than themselves, because more VCs will want to be a part of that business.
Great. We have 4 more minutes with George. Ron, do you have any other question?
One sec. So I'm unmuting myself. I think that was very interesting about speaking about Europe. I'm curious whether you also have any insights into Africa. We also have a campus in Africa. We have students who may be watching this later. Do you have any experience on the African continent?
Yeah, I mean, we have an office in Morocco, and we were like heavily looking at South Africa for a while. We were lucky enough to pre-seed Flutterwave, which is one of the few unicorns in Africa, and we're very close to Future Africa and 40X and a lot of the VCs over in the African region. Africa is a huge market. I mean, in itself, you can build $1 billion company in Africa, and I think it's ripe for disruption. The valuations at the seed stage are still very, I would say, reasonable. And with the growth of the entire continent, I think it's a very good place to start investing. And we're investing a lot more in Africa now than ever before. We were lucky enough to invest in Africa when it was still, I would say, very developing. I think the Flutterwave investment was in 2016. And, you know, Tiger Global and a few other good VCs gave them a great valuation at 1.2 billion. I think they're worth way more than that now, reserves. And companies like that are paving the way for more great entrepreneurs to develop companies and, you know, I guess more opportunity, because when you have that, when a continent or a country gets their first unicorn, it's very exciting for everybody to get involved. And then they're like, oh, like Flutterwave is evangelizing entrepreneurship and VC in Africa. And I think there's going to be more, you know, VC dollars flooding into the market. And there has been, you know, there's, I think like, I love investing in African companies. Honestly.
Yeah, well, there's such an enthusiasm. It's palpable.
What do you love most about your job as a VC, George?
I love this question. And it's honestly just like meeting people much smarter than me and learning something new every single day. You know, when you're a VC, and it's like, I'm trying to be very careful with how I say this. A lot of VCs think they're smarter than everybody else. And even for myself, I had like a point in my career, probably a few years ago, when I thought the same thing, that I was hitting good companies and my track record was really good. It's obviously better now, but I think I come down to earth by saying, when you have more misses, when you meet these entrepreneurs and you start learning and back testing your pattern recognition, and you start saying, okay, like, these are the traits that I like investing in founders. You know, this is what worked out for me. You get more humble. And I think, you know, for me, meeting somebody new and exciting, literally every single day of my life, is super just thrilling for me. And I learn something new every single day by people much smarter than me, whether it's a new VC, whether it's a next unicorn founder, whether it's a Fortune 500 CEO, whether it's an advisor, whatever. It's just super exciting to just like be on the cutting edge and meet great people along the way.
Could I ask a really quick follow-up question? What advice would you have for some of our students if they're thinking that being a venture capitalist sounds interesting to them. As far as I know, there's not a specific school or a program or playbook for becoming a VC. What advice would you give them?
Yeah, it's a great question. I would say, there once was a playbook where you would go, to a great Ivy League school, you would get your MBA, you would do 2 years of consulting, and then you would join a VC as an associate or an analyst. Or you would start a company, sell that company for hundreds of millions of dollars or billion, and then you would join as a principal or a partner at a VC. There was paths before, and I would say now, like there's still, those paths still exist, because the older stage VCs still like to, hire their kids out of undergrad, out of like great schools, or their friends' kids out of great schools. But there's so many VCs and so much competition on the market, where I would say if you want to really tap into VC, and we were talking to JC earlier about this, where it's a very competitive market. Like there's no secret. When we put out an associate position on our website, we have at least 500 applications per job that we get in the first week. It's insane. So I think like now it's doctor, lawyer, VC. That's what parents want their kids to be. So I would say if you want to be a VC, you have to learn a specific industry, because you can't be a generalist anymore and expect to get into a top tier VC, whether it's cybersecurity, food tech, clean tech, fintech, cryptocurrency. Do something and go super, super deep on it. Start writing blog posts, start trying to create your own personal brand, start trying to have more thought leadership externally. Once people start to listen to you, and then you start to apply to your VCs, you can use that as a way to gain leverage into that VC by saying, yes, I'm a cryptocurrency expert. Here's my blog posts. Here's the people that follow me. Check out my X, Y, and Z. And then they would look into it. They would probably have their own team look into your content and see if it's good or not. And then, hey, if there's an opening, maybe they'll entertain it. But heavily network based, you have to meet a lot of great people. Maybe meet some entrepreneurs. You can even pseudo advise entrepreneurs, and then have them be your reference points into VCs that have invested in them. But it's heavily network based, focus on a specific industry, and honestly, you have to kind of work your ass off. You have to work harder than everybody else, especially when you're young and trying to tap into the most competitive industry in the world.
Mm-hmm. Cool. We know you have to go. It's 9:33, unless you want to stay.
That was great advice. Thanks for sharing, George.
Thank you very much, George. This has been really fun, actually.
Yeah, it's been so fun. Thank you, JC, again, and always good to see you. And Ron and David, thank you guys so much. And to the class, good luck. If you need any advice, please contact the team, and I'm happy to share my contact information.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you, George.
Bye.
So JC, before there was a question that we got, but I know that you're very involved. You yourself are a serial entrepreneur. There was a question about NFTs, and this. I don't know if that's something that you would care to speak to.
Sure.
Or what's the question? You're hearing.
Yeah, totally.
The NFT as a business opportunity. How you see that market going, or what you're hearing from people that you're working with.
Sure. It's a very timely question, because my latest startup, Swim, we are building a social network around NFTs. So here's the thing, the huge change that this kind of technology does, right? As everything, for example, people didn't hear about the internet until 20 years after it was invented, right? It became mainstream. Even though the cycles are shorter, that happens with every technology. And, Bitcoin was the first thing that people heard about when blockchain came, right? And, there's hype, and, that it's hype when your mom and your grandma start asking you if they should invest in Bitcoin, right? Yeah. But the big change is that blockchain technology enables you to do things that you were not able to do before. NFT is a non-fungible token, meaning an NFT, it's a record in the blockchain that shows everybody that you have ownership of an asset. So whereas you could not own digital assets, with blockchain, now you can actually not only own it, you can trade it.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, there could be a company that invents a new world or a gaming company, and they sell you an island, right?
It's a way of creating scarcity. Now that it's unique.
It's a way to allow you as a user to trade that asset.
Mm-hmm.
Imagine that, for example, Facebook, right? They want to get into that. What critics are saying about Facebook not being able to do that is if you get into the metaverse, if you suddenly create tokens for the Facebook system, what you are really enabling people is to create their own social networks and take them out of Facebook. Because what it enables you is, I now own this, and if it becomes very popular, I can sell it, right? Mm-hmm. Or I can charge my users, meaning that the people in my Facebook group, I can charge them because now it's a very popular group and everybody wants to go in. Before tokens, before blockchain, users were not able to do that. So all the business opportunities that are happening, we're just seeing the tip of the iceberg, right? Tokens in the gaming industry, or NFTs, or Bitcoin, right? But every industry is going to be transformed by this because it enables a user to own their content for the first time ever. Before, right now, for example, you would, with Twitter and Instagram, you don't own your content. You put it there, but it's not your platform. The difference between, imagine if Instagram were powered by NFTs, every piece of content you put there, you would own. Kind of like YouTube, where you can create your own channel and monetize it. Mm-hmm. But YouTube enables you to monetize it within their platform because it's created for that. Well, imagine that you can monetize it outside of any platform. And because it's in the blockchain, every transaction there and every ownership there is extremely clear to everybody. So there's huge possibilities here, but you have to be also careful to ensure that it makes sense, that whatever business you come up with using that technology will enhance what the user does. Otherwise, it's just hype. Mm-hmm. That was a long.
Absolutely. I think that'd be a great transition back now to our discussion on entrepreneurship, and to wrap this up. And I think that's a core tenet of that. You know, like you're seeking to add value for your customer, and you know not only what's going to change and what is hype, but what stays a constant for the user.
Actually,
and what is
that's a good segue to.
I'm doing my best here.
Yes, thank you. It's like we coordinate. Let me share my screen, and I have a little presentation for the rest of the time today. Actually, we'll leave 5 minutes at the end for questions. So let me present. Okay. And I like to start this with this quote that actually nobody remembers who said it, but it's Silicon Valley is a graveyard, and failure is Silicon Valley's greatest strength. You heard 20 minutes ago George talk about how many failures they have had, right? So failure has something to do with it. So when you see that startup finance goes global, what you really need to ask yourselves is, can you handle failure? Because that's the only thing that Silicon Valley had that the rest of the world didn't have before. We were able to handle failure in a completely different way. So for example, I'm from Mexico City. if, a few years ago, if you raise money for your startup in Mexico and you went, you failed and you had to close your startup, investors will actually look for you, right? Even friends and family, whoever is like, you owe me the money, I don't care if you went bust or not. So the approach to failure is what you need to, as an entrepreneur, to make sure that you know how to handle, and the environment that you operate in knows how to handle, right? I have had 5 startups in Silicon Valley. Many of the investors, actually 1 was successful, 3 were complete failures, and now I'm in my 5th one. Some of the investors have been the same. It's like, I don't get it, right? Last time you lost $5 million in me, and now you're putting more money into me. So it's how you handle failure. And the best definition of entrepreneurship that I have heard is, it is a never-ending series of near-death experiences. So if you choose the path of entrepreneurship, you need to be able to handle this. It's always in the edge. From the minute you have the idea that you think it's like you're playing with it, and if you have another job, you're stealing time from the other job, and if you keep moving forward, every time is more time, and people say that, there's 10 people doing this already, you shouldn't, all the way to when you get finance and all that, you're always on the edge. You're always on the edge of failing and disappearing. And you have to, as a founder, if you choose that path, you have to make sure that you can handle that, because it's really grueling, right? So before these times, you needed a rich family, you needed assets as collateral, you needed an invention, and you needed a patent for it. That was before VC. In order to be, a successful entrepreneur that really made it big, you needed these 4 things, right? For example, Edison, Ford, and all that, they all came from rich families. Their families actually financed them, right? And then, when they got loans from people they didn't know, they needed assets, and banks need, you have a factory, I need an asset in case you go south, I can sell whatever the asset is and get my investment back. VCs don't need assets. You don't need to collateralize anything. You also needed to invent something, and you needed to patent that. Times are completely different. You don't need any of these 4 to start a startup. You don't even need an invention. So let me expand on that. There's 3 things that you need today in order to get going with a startup. You need a minimum viable product. Before, even 10 years ago, VCs would fund business plans. VCs would fund ideas. Right now, it is so easy to create a minimum viable product that they don't need to see a business plan. They need to see that you actually build something and there's some initial demand for it. That's the only way to, to get VC money. Nobody is going to fund a business plan. Nobody actually cares about a business plan. You will never see a VC in Silicon Valley asking for a financial plan. They don't want to see your numbers, right? And, I have 3 people that I'm going to bring to this presentation. And the first one is Henry Ford. And this is a quote from him. He said, if I had asked them what they wanted, they would have responded faster horses. That's the difference between having an idea and having a minimum viable product. You might have a great idea, and the problem with being an entrepreneur is that you get in love with your idea. And it's the best idea. And what you really need to fall in love is with the problem. And sometimes consumers don't know if you ask them. However, they will know if you put something in front of them and watch them use it, right? Airbnb had the same problem. Airbnb, it's ridiculous, right? The idea is ridiculous, and that's why Plug and Play didn't invest in them. How in the world do you think that people will want to rent a place for a day or two without a security deposit to complete strangers? I mean, what if they destroy your place or burn it or steal everything? And in the other side of the market, who would want to stay in the house of somebody they don't know, right? What if somebody rapes you, which is exactly what George said when they decided to pull their investment from Airbnb, right? So Airbnb could not ask. They had to put a product in front of people and see how they use it. And that's what an MVP means, meaning stop asking, stop doing research. Yes, you have an idea, find a way to put it in front of people, and then take it forward, change it, or abandon it. So first of all, you need a minimum viable product. You need to find a way to make your idea usable without money. Number two, you need a world-changing vision. And that's what George was referring to, the key difference that he saw 10 years ago between European mindset of entrepreneurs and Silicon Valley mindset. Your vision needs to be world-changing. Otherwise, it's a family business, which is great, right? You want to be wealthy and have a business that does $10 million a year. That's great, but that's not VC material. They chase deals that can become unicorns. And the only way you can become a unicorn is if you basically change the world in your industry. Otherwise, you will not get to those valuations. And the reason that the VC model works like that is because of failure. The most successful VCs have a 5% success rate, meaning 1 out of 20 companies will make it. The other 19 will not make it. You will lose your money, but that one will be a unicorn. That one will make up for all the other 19. And you cannot have that. You cannot pitch to a VC if you don't have a world-changing vision, because that's just not their model. And then the number 3 thing, and actually this guy, Ron was talking about what will not change. And quickly, Jeff Bezos, that's the way that Amazon invests in companies that they buy, right? And I'm going to quickly tell you about this concept. So Amazon and Jeff Bezos are really good at buying companies and making it work. Whereas Twitter and Facebook and Google buy a lot of companies and a lot of those investments goes up. They don't work for their model. Amazon is really good at buying companies that actually make Amazon grow. How do they do it? And, he was interviewed one time and the interviewer said, how are you so good at predicting what will change? And he laughed. And he said, actually, we focus on the opposite. We focus on what will not change. And he gave an example. He said, look, I can put money that in the next 50 years, our users will want 2 things. They want to buy stuff that is cheap, meaning they want low prices. And whatever they buy, they want to consume it as fast as possible, meaning they want it now. We know that those 2 things will not change in the next 50 years. So our job is to bring to Amazon the companies and the technologies that enable us to deliver on those 2 things, on what will not change in terms of price and delivery. So when new technologies like blockchain or drones or metaverse or whatever you want to call it come, we pass them through that filter. What he's really talking about is a humanistic way of a big vision. So if you have a big vision, it's not like, how can I use, blockchain or drones or whatever comes, because there's always hype in something to make money. No. What is a humanistic thing? And actually, George was talking about humanistic investment. And technology is really a humanistic thing, It's a way to make something human easier, better, right? So you know, you can bet that people will still want to play in the future, or communicate, or hug each other, or enjoy the world, or go for a vacation. Those are the things that will not change. Now, how can you use new technologies? How will new technologies enable you to deliver that in a better way? Because you don't sell technology. And a good company like that is Apple. Apple doesn't sell technology. Apple actually, Steve Jobs always said, technology should be invisible. You should not even care about technology as a user. Technology should be just your path to enhancing your life. There's one more thing that you need in today's world, and you need ingenuity. Before, when I had my first startup in 2000, in the year 2000, building anything took a lot of money. Building a website took about $300,000. So people were funding business plans, right? You need the money to go anywhere, right? There was nothing, there was no Kickstarter, there was really nothing. So people would fund business plans. Today, you can actually launch something, you can build something without money by being very creative on how you use your resources. How do you compensate the people that work for you at the beginning? How do you, so for example, there are accelerators that you can join that will give you all the know-how and host you and give you connections. There are lawyers that will not charge you anything until you raise your first money. And if you don't ever raise your first money, you don't owe them anything. For example, Airbnb. Airbnb didn't launch Airbnb on Airbnb. So one of Brian Chesky's, the founder of Airbnb, his quote says, build something that 100 people love, not something that 1 million people kind of like. So if you're building something for 10 people like Airbnb, maybe you don't even need to build Airbnb. And what they did is they used a listing system in the US called Craigslist to test if people wanted to rent rooms and houses for 1 day, 2 days at a time, without security deposits or anything, right? So in order to test that, they didn't need to build anything. So the first Airbnbs were actually listings on a listing service called Craigslist, where you list things. And that's how they created something that 100 and fine-tuned something that 100 people love, right? By being creative. How can I use something that exists to put something in front of people and make sure that there's demand for it and I'm not drinking my own Kool-Aid, right? And then if 100 people love it, then I go and then I build something and then I spend the money. But if not, you as an entrepreneur should be the first one to want to quit that, because you don't want to barking at the wrong tree. You don't want to leave your job and security and all that for an idea that nobody likes. So 3 things you need. You need an MVP, you need ingenuity, and you need a world-changing vision. That's the only things you need in today's world to get a business going. And now I'm going to stop there so we can have, I'm going to stop sharing, the last 5 minutes for questions from Ron or from the audience or from whatever.
Thanks, JC. I think that is an excellent way to wrap it up. The whole thing, I think that what we're seeing today, just to kind of conclude, because our series is Faster Futures from Silicon Valley, is that, Silicon Valley, it's important to say, is a model that has worked. It is not a dogma. It is not something that we are preaching. We are saying, take a look at what some of the practices and some of the behaviors here and see what can work for you. I think that would be something that you agree on, and most people in Silicon Valley would agree. And personally, I'm very excited by the fact that, in a way, Silicon Valley is still important, but it's not like an island. It's really now Silicon Valley has, through many different programs, I've seen investors going to Africa. I've seen, we've actually at Omnis Education, we've hosted events, Europeans coming to Silicon Valley. So it's really part of a movement now, a movement towards innovation, and a movement towards a new type of business model. And I'm excited by that. I'm excited that that it's not just like come to the zoo. It's like we're not in cages, and this is spreading around the world.
Totally, I'm very glad we are losing our monopoly on that. There shouldn't be a monopoly. And actually, the two keywords that you use is a behavior, is a way of thinking. That's Silicon Valley, and thank God that is now spreading everywhere, right? But you need to be able, as a region, as an entrepreneur, to handle failure.
Mm-hmm.
That was one of the things that George touched on, and it's equally there for VCs and for entrepreneurs. How do you handle failure, and make sure that you will fail? What will you do after that, and how will you react after that as an entrepreneur, but also as an ecosystem, as a society, as a country, right? I am going to be very curious about the next downturn in tech, because that's when we will test how far the Silicon Valley culture has traveled, right? Because, we've had failures here, big failures, right? 2008, and 2000, and it goes down, and it's not like there's an exodus and everybody leaves and we close doors and say, thank you very much. That was a nice game. Whoever made money, then it was very lucky, right? So I would like to see one of the downturns that will be global in tech, the next one, because now it's global, see who actually handles failure in a good way, and what kind of companies come out of that, and where. That will be for me, the acid test for that.
So, JC, thanks again. I think that, I think there's so many components when we say behavior, and I think one of them is definitely audacity. But I think people get that already. But meeting people like George, meeting people like you, I think that we get kind of a richer, deeper sense of some of the behaviors and mindsets, and that includes humility. Obviously facing, accepting failure, there's that side to it, which is really important, both from the entrepreneur perspective and the investor perspective, as we saw with George today. So I think this has allowed us to get a richer understanding of what it is to be an entrepreneur in Silicon Valley in one short hour. So I thank you for that. And we're going to wrap it up with that. So hopefully, some of our students who are watching or will be watching in the online and on YouTube will connect with us. We are in San Francisco, Omnis Education, San Francisco campus. You can look us up. We host programs throughout the year focused on innovation, entrepreneurship, and creativity. From the undergraduate to executive MBA programs, we also have a number of programs where our student entrepreneurs come here to learn not about innovating, but by innovating. It's very, very experiential. So we hope to connect with you in the future. And thank you again, JC. And thank you to the team of Omnis Education, Digital Education. They've done a great job helping us live stream these sessions.
Thank you very much.
And have a great end to 2021. And see you in 2022. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.